Thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming. I know it's probably a hard decision with what's going on uptown at the Arts and Letters, so I'm really honored that you guys were able to make it. I'm just going to get right to it. One of the things that I'm going to talk about is basically community. I'm going to talk about the school a little bit, and I'm beginning with this image because I know a lot of people have talked about the school, but it goes back a few decades, and a lot of you guys know that. And I think there's something very powerful. There's something very powerful about this room. This is some shots that I got. This is a shot of Leland Bell, Paul George's. And I wanted to show these images just for the history of the people that have been here, the people that have taught here, and the people that have affected me. So you have this lineage that is taking place. Here's another one of Sidney Geist. And there's Nicholas Carone down there in the bottom, who I know a lot of people were affected by him too. Some of the people that have been here and maybe attended the school during these years probably know some of the people in these photographs, but I think there's something about that history that is very profound. Here's another one. That's Philip Guston. There's Leo Steinberg. And I had some of my own moments with Leo Steinberg. I mean, I knew him. I didn't know him a lot, but I worked at the Met, and I'll talk about some of that. But one of the things I want to talk about is when you meet people, and even if they say just one word to you, how they affect you. Here's another one. This is Wayne T. Boyd. I went to the Wayne T. Boyd show. I think it was at the Whitney, I believe. I think it was around 2002 or 3, and I almost cried. I felt like by the end of the show, I felt like I knew him in some personal way, and that's just the power of painting. But this is a powerful moment to see him here teaching at the school. This is some things that John Cage said. I'm not going to read through all that, but that's also pretty intense, that John Cage was also a part of the history of the school too. This is just some of the names that I don't know if you guys, Robert De Niro, Elaine de Kooning, Gretchen Campbell, Philip Guston again, Sidney Geist, Mercedes Matters. All these people on this list really, I think, are important for the New York world. I think a lot of them don't get the respect that they deserve either. This is actually Elaine de Kooning here in the studio teaching students. I thought this was very powerful. People don't talk about this all the time. And there's something I'm going to talk about, and this is another one. This is Rosemary Beck. I got to meet Rosemary Beck. I didn't take her class, but I knew some of the people that took her class. And she was also one of these life forces. This book just barely came out. I was at Stevens the other day, and he had just barely got this book in the mail, so I want to get it. I recommend you guys get it. I was really excited to see it, and I would just hope it happens more with some of these people that we all celebrate and that the school knows are important people. I put this image in because I really wasn't meant to be here. You know, when you do these talks, and this is probably the most important talk I've ever given because I'm in a place that really changed my life. And I think growing up, being African American, and some of the things that we see going on in society, the guns, NRA, this was the images that I was shown. So when I was going to Chicago, a lot of my friends laughed at me. They're like, you're going to die. You know, people are shooting each other every day, and this still happens in Chicago, but this is what society was telling me. Here's the other thing. These were movies, and I have a few stories. I watched this movie. I did a talk at recently with some art students or some students who were flunking, and I put these images in there. But I really did want to show them because when you think about society, there is something, I don't know, I feel like sometimes we're brainwashed. How do we get to the truth? And when I was a kid, and a lot of people wanted to emulate this, and I'm not saying that, oh, this is a special story or my case was special, but this is what I was seeing. And this is another thing, this idea of images when you watch the news. In my talk today, it's like I feel like I got nothing to lose. And I don't care if I'm going to be judged in a way, but I want to tell my truth. And I want to tell my truth about my community, the time that I live in, the importance of people who are alive and the people that changed my life. But this image to me is something that I've always, since I left and came to the school and some of the people I've met, this is not the life that I had to lead. My life changed. This is me with one of my close friends. We're still friends. And this is me back in Chicago. I think it's like 1997. I went to Italy, and me and this guy became close friends. And this trip changed my life forever. And I still think about it. He still thinks about it. But there's something I met Dennis Congdon recently, and he said something very profound to me. And he goes, where I was from, I didn't necessarily think that was my home. But he goes, when I went to Italy and I went to Florence, it became my home. And I think there's truth to that. Like, I wasn't necessarily home at Utah. I wasn't at home with some of the things that I saw. But in a way, when I came to the New York Studio School for the first time, it did feel like a home. It felt real to me. This is me. I kind of showed this for my drawing students that take my class. Just so, I draw everywhere I go, and I got that from some of the teachers that I had. But when I was in Italy, one of the things that I did want to do was record that. And there's a power of having the sketchbook on you all the time and recording your path, recording what you see. This is my friend's work. So I'm going to just go through some of this. This guy's name is Alberto Aguilar. I met him in Chicago, and a lot of these images that I'm going to show you are these friends of mine. But instead of me going back and talking about de Kooning or, Rembrandt or Corot, which is all the people that I love, I want to talk about the people that are actually alive. And I want to talk about the people that I met at a young age, maybe in my 20s, and I've known for about 20 years, and they still affect me in a very positive way. They affect the way that I think. So I don't need to go far. I can just look at my brother, I can look at my friend, and see how he's expressing his truth. This is an image. He was a painter when we met, and he always changes things, and I think that's powerful. It challenges me. This is something he made in his house. This is a funny photo because that painting there is the paintings that he was making when we met. And this is kind of the work that he makes now. This is another friend of mine. This is Joan Smith-Berner. I met her in Chicago. I think she really had a strong influence on me. And I'm just going to start showing these. If you look at this, she always was a great drawer. And when she would talk to me, we would always talk about the rectangle. And she would say certain things about mark making and things. And those things have always stuck with me. Here's another one of her drawings. Here's one of her paintings. They're small, but they're powerful. And the thing that hurts me sometimes is some people give up with the art world. People they don't want to be a part of this beast. The Chelsea, the things that kind of control us. But then there's that other side of being an artist, a painter, where it's not about fame, it's just about expression. And I think all these people share that. Here's another one of her paintings. This guy, I was actually drawing with the first time in this room on that side. And we were neighbors. And we would draw, the drawing marathon, you draw 8 hours, and he would have a ton of chalk on his face, and I'd be dirty, and we'd be looking at each other smiling, and Graham would be giving critiques, and we became friends, but it was meaningful. And I think about some of the things that are going on in the world. What does life mean? What does my life mean? I'm just going to go through these. Another one. I asked all my friends to send me images of when I first met them and images that they were working on currently. A lot of the ideas I feel are in these paintings. Here's another one of his. I think this is a great painting, by the way. I really love the space in that and the movement. Here's another one. I always think about what's going on with the space that we live in. What do we think about space? We know what de Kooning thought about space. We know what Van Gogh thought about space, but what do I think about space? This is another friend of mine. Some of these people I met at this school. This guy's name is Ben Ekman. And the reason why I'm talking about these people is not, I want us to believe in our time. This guy's somewhere over here slaving away in the studio. Nobody's talking about him, but I care about him. Here's another one of his. And when we were in school together, it was magical. I mean, he was working hard. I was working hard. Maybe there was some competition. Maybe but there was a push to achieve something. What's the goal? To make something magical. And I see him searching. I don't need to look at de Kooning. I can look at my friend. And I'm not saying that I don't need, but these are powerful things. There's ideas in here that we got from Stanley Lewis. And I can see them when I look at his work. This guy went to school. This is Ben Pritchard's work. I went to Ben Pritchard's studio about a couple months ago, almost by accident. I was in Bushwick. I walked in his studio. I felt like I was walking back in time. His studio felt alive to me. I've been in some studios, and now people don't even need studios. They just need a desk with a computer. But his studio had paint. You could smell the paint. There were paintings everywhere, paintings in crates. I'm like, this guy's on fire, and I felt it. Here's a drawing of his. This is a still life when he was in Chicago. We had some of the same teachers. We overlapped, but we didn't know each other. But this was one of the teachers. We had Dan Gustin as a teacher. Here's another one of Ben's paintings. I love the thing about this, when we go through these, look at the way that artists, and it's not just me, but my peers, look at the way they want to push the envelope. Here's one I think he just made last week. Here's another one. This is another friend of mine too. I'm sorry. This is oh my God. Somebody help me. Yes, thank you. This is another one of Todd. I knew Todd was a great painter when we were in school. There was a moment I was at work and I came here to the school, and I think they were doing one of the critiques, and I saw one of his paintings outside of the critique, and I looked at it and I said, this guy's got some fire. And it's only gotten better in time. But I also want to show that my peers are challenging me. This is another one of my peers. This is Captain Lepp's work. I look at these images. I knew when she was kind of making these paintings. I don't know. I think these go back maybe about 10 or 12 years. But you think about some of the things that are happening today. And I look at this guy in this water. And I feel like maybe there's something in relationship. Life is like that sometimes. Being pushed around. Intimidated. Not intimidated. This is a more recent one of hers. I think these are powerful paintings as well. She works on these paintings for a long time too. These are some recent ones. I think when I see changes like this and I see my friends, no matter what, just pushing, trying and trying. And nobody's talking about it. Maybe we are our friends. This is the New York Studio School, and this is the school over here. I don't believe in that. I think from my teachers I learned power is power. It's in the image. This is another good friend of mine. These paintings, this was a special moment. I've been friends with this guy. I met him in Chicago. We've been friends for almost 20 years. His name is Michael Dobb. I met him in Chicago. A lot of these relationships and these friends came through art too. And I wanted to, just talk about that. But we were making these paintings in Red Hook. And he would find stuff on the street, and then he would make these paintings. Some of you might know this building in Red Hook if you've ever been there. This is what he's making now. He lives in L.A. I feel like L.A. came to him, but there's something surreal like life in a glass. The mind is incredible. This is another friend of mine. This is Ben King. And we were also friends, me, him. There was a community in Chicago. I found a community here at the New York Studio School. But all of us were it wasn't necessarily, I think, I had some friends at the Met, and we wanted to go to the Cedar Bar. And we wanted to go be where de Kooning was and where the guys hung out. But then I realized that I have a moment. My friends are making beautiful things. This is one of Ben's paintings from Chicago as well, a landscape. This is a recent piece of his. Something magical about that. That none of my friends have given up. They kind of just keep on trying. This is another friend of mine. This is Jonathan Harkham. Very close people. I was going to school, me and Jonathan shared a studio downstairs, but the first time I met him, he kind of came into my studio like kind of really shy. He goes, you know, my name's Jonathan, I want to introduce myself, and I just want to let you know I think you're a good painter. And we kind of shook hands, you know, but then later we really became close. And we're still friends. And I still love seeing his work. This is some of the things that he was making when we were downstairs. And I love these moments. The narrative. So when you look at people and you say, well, maybe there's Corot, maybe I look at Corot, maybe I look at Max Beckman. But then it's like, no, there's Jonathan. What is Jonathan doing? What's he working on? This is a more recent one of his. This is actually on display. And then I love the idea of, I always tell people that Van Gogh was my most favorite painter. And it's true, he is one of my favorite painters. That's just because I lean on him. Because I need him. I need Van Gogh in my life. I need that passion, that hunger. When I get knocked around and I feel sad, I think about Van Gogh. But then I also love my friends because they're doing the same thing that he was kind of doing, recording their moment. It's such a powerful thing to be in the moment and translate your truth. I love this. This is powerful. The idea of drawing has an experience. I talk to my students about that sometimes, and I think Jonathan is a great draftsman. But there's also that passion of, I'm going to nail this drawing. I'm going to get it done. I put this in there just for the idea of the kiss. You guys know who this is, right? But I love how ideas kind of sort of go back and forth. Love never changes through time, somehow. This is one of his landscapes. This is another friend. He's a good friend. I shared a studio with this guy. And I care about him because it was during the recession. And there were a lot of things. Nobody was really in Bushwick back then. And I'm talking about him because I think some of the people in my life, me sharing a studio with somebody wasn't just like, I need to occupy this space. So I'm going to get this guy in here to pay this money. No, it was friends. And I was recommended through him through a friend, and we all cared about each other. This was some of the work that he was making when we were sharing the studio. He used to paint plastic bags. He would set these things up and paint them. This was another one of his. This is what he's making now. And I love that search, right? There's a search here. You can see it. He's looking for something. This is a portrait I did of him at the time, and I threw that in there. I'm showing this picture because also what I was talking about when I think about being alive. And you guys know who these guys are. That's Stanley Lewis, and that's William Bailey. And there's a great joy that I get when I meet certain people and I know who they are, because I had heard about them from Joan, from some of my friends. Do you know who Stanley is? Do you know who Bailey is? And I didn't really know him, but then I got to meet him uptown, and I'm like, well, I'm meeting this is my history. These people are important. They may not be in magazines. They may not be like, at the Met Bureau, but I know they've affected a lot of people, and they've also affected me. I put this in here because didn't really know, so if you think about this was one of the first paintings I had ever really saw that really changed me. This is one of Dan Gustin's paintings. Then I put these guys in here. I think I'll talk about my teachers forever. Because when you come from that sort of gangster world or that mentality that I showed you in the beginning, where that's what African American males did, right? We shot each other. But when I went to Chicago and I saw this painting, I was like, that's life. That's real. That's where it's at. Here's one of Dan's landscapes. I love this painting with the guy with the lion head on it. There's the power of narrative. This is Don Southard. I love him too. I think when I had some of these people as teachers, I could go and talk to them, or they said things to me, and it really affected me, and those words still resonate with me. This is another one of Don's paintings. You look at, there's such a poetry when you see that. And that idea of taking from the old but making it your own. This is Susanna's work. She gave a talk here a few weeks ago. I was here. I had to put it in. I don't know if some of you were here, but she was one of those people that affected me. And it's about the ideas. I think this painting is great. When she gave her talk, just how that space is around her head. Like that painting can become more than just an image sometimes. That maybe it can talk about things that go unsaid. You know, almost like that dream state. I mean, I'm no aficionado on these things. It's just the way that they make me feel. This is another teacher of mine, William Itter. I had him at IU, and he said something to me. I was working on this painting, and I thought it was done. He goes, I think it was just started. And that always kind of set with me, like, you know, oh, I can make something, and I can be putting down some nice strokes. But, you know, he said, is it better to have more or less, right, as paintings, to see them through? And that always set with me. Here's another one of his. And there were a few people, but that's what I talk about these teachers, because they still are in the studio with me. Here's another one. And this is Graham. And there's one thing I want to say, you know, there's moments when I felt like, when I say that the studio school felt like home to me, but I always, even after grad school, I always felt like Graham was challenging me, and he was just responding to the work. He wasn't responding to ego, to anything besides what was powerful. And I can't say enough about that sometimes, that I was able to find somebody like that. And the thing about the school is when I came here, we would stay up all night. People know this. We can tell the stories. Outside there in the gallery, the room was full with people. I'd never seen an environment like that. So the environment's so alive, and everybody around electric. Some more. I love these paintings because one of these is really small, and I saw it, and it blew my mind about scale. That there is no such thing as scale sometimes. I guess scale just happens in the painting. It's how you deal with that window. I love this painting too. It's another one. I think this painting's at the Met, and I almost saw it, but I don't know if they ever did. I may have to be corrected, but I always loved that umbrella. I never saw an umbrella like that. And then once I saw his painting, I started seeing those umbrellas all the time. But then, you know, the other thing about it too was, you know, what's fascinating is that idea of the umbrella, the sort of so mundane, right? That shape. But then when you paint it, it becomes sort of epic. This is Wilbur Newald, who is also a very influential person and a great painter. He taught here. I studied with him. He loves Cezanne. Very powerful person. Everybody in that class, all their drawings ended up looking like kind of Cezanne drawings. He's just a great poetic speaker. Here's one of his still lifes. Here's another one. This is Stanley Lewis. All these things are just, when I look at these images, this is Milton Risnick. I put this in there because it's the idea of surface. And I didn't know much about Milton. I know that he taught here, but I went and saw the show the other day, and there was something about that surface that really got to me. So I took some of these shots. This was somebody, you gotta forgive me, this was at Stevens. I wanted to talk about Stevens a little bit because I also feel like he's one of those people that have introduced people and kind of is one of these leaders of of us, like kind of the nobodies, you know? Like, I always feel like Steven's this guy that really cares about painting for painting's sake, you know? He's not going to necessarily play a mind game on you. This is another one of his artists. But that idea surface was really resonating with me the other day. This is a Kossoff painting. So there's something about that I can look at Stanley's surface, I can look at Kossoff's surface, I can go into Steven's gallery and I can see things. So what I'm saying is that my history is very rich. My current history is rich. This is Peter Williams' show. I don't know if you guys saw, this is very powerful stuff too. I love this show. You know, when you talk about being African American and you make, you know, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I think the way he talks about his story is powerful and it doesn't seem forced to me. This is Ruth Miller and Leland Bell, which was nice to see at Stevens again. And this is, I just barely met Stephanie, but this is her work. I went and saw the show, but there's something about these paintings too. There's something about when I talked about space earlier, right? It's not just about the light, but it's that, to me, there was the futurist that I always like in some of Boccioni's paintings, how he dealt with movement and light is movement, and I love it as an idea. But again, I don't have to go very far. I can just go here to Stevens and I can meet Stevens, and then there's this powerful work happening. This is one of her teachers. This is Ann Gail's work. I put these here because I saw her work, but I didn't know some of that lineage about ideas, structure, mark making, space. This is another friend. I put Sam here for a reason. And I think it's about the light too. And, you know, I knew Sam overlapped with me a little bit, so I feel like I'm getting to know Sam more and more every year, and his work as well. But there's something very beautiful about these paintings and quiet to me. This is Diana. I just barely met her. This is another thing I saw. Some of these things I'm just showing you because it's about, you know, being alive. This was at Marlboro. This guy's name is escaping me. I think it's, I'm not even going to try. Forgive me. But I think there's something very beautiful about his work. And when I went there and I saw this image in this painting, I was like, wow. Somehow he's dealing with the right now in a very, like, classical way. It almost reminds me of a Trompe l'oeil painting with an edge. You know, like the 13 lights down there in the trick-ass beach. That's like amazing. Somebody help. This is Gideon Bach's work here. You know, I met Gideon Bach. I wanted to show him because I had a few of his books and then I finally got to meet him, but I would always look at them. So when I look at this, how he's dealt with this space in this painting, there's something very solid and infinite, and it's just something that gets me. You guys know who this is. Help me out with this, Ophir. This is, I met Glenn Goldberg through my friend Ben King. And I didn't know that Glenn went here, but I would look at his paintings. I knew I'd heard his name before, but then when I met Glenn, I could have never imagined that he'd make paintings like this. You know, he looks like he could kill you, you know, like a hitman. You know what I mean? And then when I talk to him, it's like everything he says, I feel like, don't let me mess up my life. Like, I feel like I need to be straight. Like, I need to check myself when I talk to Glenn, you know? Like, am I saying the right things? But I love these paintings. And I love that I can meet these people and I can have a conversation with him and we can talk about painting. in a very meaningful way. We can talk about ideas. It's a great painting. All these images are small because I just snatched them off the internet. No, I don't. I don't, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just pulling some. This is Jack Witten. I put this up here because I want to talk about this for a minute. And it's the idea of being an African American. And I went to this talk, and they were talking about Jack and when he was making these paintings, but I think they go very much beyond. You wouldn't know he was a black person making this painting. And I think there's something about me that wants to get at that. You know, you don't know who made this, only maybe till later. But when you look at some of these paintings that he did make, wow, it blows my mind, right? So what is my subject matter? Does it have to be my skin color? No, it does not. Look at that. It's awesome. So I was going to show, this is my work. I'm going to kind of flow through these. I wanted to talk about, I worked at the Met as a guard. I worked at Sotheby's for a little bit. And I also did a little bit of carpentry. And I'm going to show some pictures, but I'm going to fly through these. One of the things about this, every job I had, I never wanted to be a crybaby. And one thing about when you put a uniform on, it's like you are now egoless and you become property of the institution. But I never felt that way because I knew that my friends were working. I knew that I had great teachers that instilled a sense of an idea of what it was to be a person who worked towards something. So at all my jobs, I never forgot about painting. And I never stopped about trying to take away from the experience of working where I was. So a lot of these I was making on post. I just took some people to the Met. I showed them this painting. This was a painting from that painting, guys. And I told them it's one of my favorite paintings in the museum. It's like an Italian painting from, I can't remember, maybe the 1700s. But it's wacky. And it's got that wacky space I'm talking about. Almost like Stephanie's painting, you know? It's another drawing. I was drawing all the time at the Met, by the way. All the time. These are some drawings I made. I went to Chautauqua, and I wanted to work on drawings there. I knew I couldn't paint, so I talked to my class, what is an epic drawing? The only reason why I said that is because I tried to make my own. I think I failed, but, you know, this is an attempt. I'm showing this too. I've always had this love for Harlem, and I'm going to show some landscapes. This is up by the cloisters. Every time I walk past this, I take my dog for a walk, and every time I look out at that landscape, I want to paint it. Every time. So one time I did this. I took a bunch of photos, and I made this drawing from that. And that was my idea of that moment. I never got to paint it, but I did draw it. This is some more drawings. I'm showing these because I feel like these drawings help me lead into painting. This is one of the things. When I worked at Sotheby's, I saw a lot of contemporary work. And I didn't want to hate it. You know what I mean? Like, you go to someone, oh man, that's crap. And you know, this is terrible. What is this? One time, I was in Chicago and we were downstairs and I was with Don Southard and we were looking at something and I got really dismissive about it. And he goes, you can't dismiss that. That's a part of your time too. And that was one of those things that kind of always made me second guess myself. Instead of hating, maybe I should try to see what's there. This is from my job. There's a reason why I'm showing these from my job is the idea of process, the idea of hard work. When I worked with my friend, I tried to work with him for almost 8 years. We were friends. I met him through a friend I went to school with, but he was an all-around person. He'd show up to work on time. He could work 2 days straight, and he would just go. And he was also a great-hearted person. And that made me want to be a better person, right? So if I'm making paintings, it's not just that I'm making paintings and I'm showing my skills, but how am I a better person? I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, but I know I'm reaching for a goal, to be something. This is him on the ladder. We stayed up all night doing this that night. It was just me and him. These were for photo shoots. But the reason why I'm showing this is the idea that if I'm a worker, I got to work hard. If I'm going to compete with Rembrandt, I got to get to work every day. Like I said, I'd never really stopped thinking about that. This is just a flat. But I'd have to sand it and sand it and sand it and sand it and then repaint it and paint it and sand it and sand it. And sometimes I'd be like, oh, that's like a painting. Look at that. This is another thing that we did. Even though I was working this job, I never gave up. This is a runway that we did on 42nd Street. It was one of the craziest stories I've ever had. I was driving this big rig truck, like one of those flatbeds, and it had about 18 steel decks on it. I was terrified. No sleep, but I still had to drive that truck, you know? And there's something about, like, if I could get through that, then I can make it as a painter. So I may not be famous, I may not be the best painter, but I'm not going to give up. This is me at work. So I made this painting. I'm going to go through these I took a lot of recycled material from the shop. And because I was working at Sotheby's, I tried to make these collages. And this is where some of that material came from the shop. This is an old painting of mine. I'm just going to go through some of these. If you think about what I said about that idea of my teachers, my friends, me trying to be a part of my moment. And these have been my moments, right? This is me. I call this Displaced in Harlem. Feeling displaced in Harlem. It's another painting I made when the recession was going on. And I feel like sometimes I've always had this relationship with money for this weird reason. I don't know if it's because I'm African American male. I don't know if it's, there's many things I could talk about. But there is a power in our country when you think about what happened in Florida. And people don't want to talk about owning guns. Or do you want to talk about money? Or you don't, does it boil down to money? I don't know. It's another painting I made almost from the same time. It's another one. Another painting I made about the Civil War. This painting was about the tsunami in Japan. This one too. I painted this because I think even when you look at nature right now, we don't really know what's going to happen, right? 80 degrees today, typhoon for 20 minutes, 20 degrees the next day, mudslides, fires for weeks. Nature is powerful. I named this after my friend. I call it, I think it called radiation in the form of Johnny Big Time Blues. But this was, I don't know if you guys remember that, when some of that radioactivity was going into the ocean because of the tsunami. I started doing these aerial views. Still some of the same ideas. Here's another one. This is of Harlem. So sometimes one of the reasons why I'm bringing these up, sometimes I paint from photographs, sometimes I paint from the computer, sometimes I just paint straight from life. And I had this moment when I was in Harlem making these paintings. I had been to this park hundreds of times. And then one year I decided to paint it. And it was interesting because I would get to meet people from the community too when I was making these paintings. Here's another one of Bushwick. There's a guy I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to bring him up, but I met him when I was working on this painting. Here's another one. Some of that material, that reflective material, came from my job. And then I just came to the studio and I put it on the painting and I said, well, what can echo that? So it almost became like a chess game for me. Like, I'm going to put the most crazy thing on this painting and see if I can balance it out. Here's another one, the Bills. Then I got into making these double screen paintings, and I got this Nook for Christmas, and I realized you could have the screen open. So I was like, oh, I can have something on the top and the bottom. It's a painter's idea, the square within the square. But then I said, oh, well, if I do this, then it kind of causes this narrative to happen too. So I made these. I called this one Heaven and Hell. Then I made this painting Here's another one. I went to LA and visited my Jonathan, and I made this painting. And I was kind of going through some stuff, and I feel like sometimes you don't really know, who am I? Which head am I? I don't know. I'm always fascinated with space. And I made this painting too. So sometimes the subject, I don't know why I'm so fascinated with these things, but I just am. This is one of my favorite paintings. I'm showing this because of this. Now, I always tell people, I love Broadway Boogie Woogie, right? But the reason is because of how you move around the rectangle. So when I made this painting, which is from life, I felt like it had some of those moments of Broadway Boogie Woogie. Here's some of the more of my current paintings. You know, I like these paintings. I did these paintings of the Olympics, and I'm going to fly through these paintings. But the one thing that I felt that I loved about was that state of, that moment of them jumping into the water. And I feel like all these paintings, they're just like metaphors for me, right? That we're always jumping into something. Maybe we jump into, maybe we're just caught in a certain headspace. I feel like that one has some of that Broadway Boogie Woogie too. Here's another. I do portraits as well. This was a friend of mine. This is a transcription I did. It's another one. I'm showing this painting because, again, I'm going to go back to my moment. And I knew about Dana Schultz, probably like a lot of people did when she started blowing up. And I met her because my friend there was at the you know, the thing that they do at PS1 or whatever, at the museum, at the Whitney Biennial. So I got to meet her, and I think she's pregnant here too. But there was something very magical about that night to me, and about me meeting her. And then, as we know, the Emmett Tillman thing came up. And you can't really see the painting, but my idea was that I wasn't mad that she made that painting, and I think it was courageous. And I think there's something about how we tell stories in modern times. I think me being an African American, I shouldn't just have to own that, and other people shouldn't be able to talk about it either. If we all talk about it as a community, then maybe we can all fix it. And I think that's maybe what she did. I mean, I think she brought up something that was profound, is all I can say. This was another thing. This is Kara Walker's work. And I got upset about this work, not to say that I'm aficionado, but I felt like as a black person, I'd always seen images of black people very sad and downtrodden. And I feel like there's a part of our culture where they expect us or me as a painter to talk about that. So I made these paintings in reflection of that. And I'm just trying to look at myself and my own history, not the history that America has told me, the slave history, but the history of the human soul, survival. So I made these. And I'm showing these images because I think when I look at certain things and I feel bad, sometimes I think about Native Americans. And I was thinking about it today. Where do you go when you feel pain, right? We know what's happened to Native Americans, but there's also this power that they have that comes from the inside. And it's always been there. So I made these paintings, trying to connect to that in my own way. I don't know if, I think a lot about being a painter is just attempting. It's amazing how you can be in the moment and you don't necessarily judge things, how things can push you into another realm. So for me, like, of being affected by that Kerouac, bad or wrong, it kind of did make me make these paintings. It's another one of that. This is Dennis Cogden's work. I just barely met him, and we have a show at RISD right now. And I brought him up earlier, but I think he's one of those people that have made this moment, my life, 2018, really magical. Sorry they're so small. These are the paintings I made for the show. He called me and he said, he didn't call me, he emailed me. And he said, let's have a show together because I feel like we got nothing to lose. So the idea of our show, what it was titled was The Search for Personal Truth in an Uncertain World. But what we were talking about was like the climate. So we were maybe going to send emails back and forth to the paintings, which I couldn't do that, but I just thought about what he was saying, and these are the paintings that I came up with this uncertain world that we live in. These are these robot portraits I did. This one's of these space guys going up to Mars. This one is like these robots. The machine, I made this because I feel like sometimes when I look at popular culture, it's just like, I feel like sometimes we behave like machines. We love machines, but we act like machines too. There's a couple things I want to talk about, and this is a few people. And I'm almost done here. I'm going to fly through these, but I met this is Carl Polanski, who made Williamsburg Paint. And I only got to meet him briefly. But sometimes I think about these people that don't necessarily have a voice. And maybe, that we lose, but their work remains. And I think we need to celebrate these people. So these are some of his paintings. I know that he loved the opera a lot, and he painted a lot of opera singers. That's his self-portrait. We were friends on Facebook for like a month, I think, before he died, and I saw him almost the same way. One day, I think he was coming downstairs, and I was outside, and he said, "Hey, are you Clintel?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I really like your paintings." And I was like, wow, I knew about him too. And for the people who knew him, he was a really special guy. It's another friend of mine that I lost a couple years ago, and I'm going to show his work just really quick. He died of leukemia. But I think he changed my life. He was the one that I talked to about the landscape, and he goes, he went to Paladin Chisel in Chicago. I went to the Art Institute. He goes, at Paladin Chisel, we don't do that. And then, there was the way that I was putting the painting together that he didn't understand. And we ended up talking about painting for like an hour. And then we became friends, and we started talking about painting all the time. But he was making these paintings, and I thought they were pretty great. The narrative of them. I mean, I look at this painting, and I feel like that's right now. Here's another one he made. This is what he did of Mount Fuji. We always had this joke that I was going to go to Mount Fuji. He was Japanese, and we were going to go to Mount Fuji together and paint Mount Fuji. This is my painting he bought that painting actually. And then this was the painting in his house. He actually bought a few paintings from me, but he was a very sweet person. There's another person that I was thinking about, and this is the last image I'll show. And this is just the power of the school. This is Aliseo. I don't know if you guys remember him. And he became friends with one of my friends who's a writer. And Aliseo passed away. He was hit on his bike. I know a lot of the people. He worked at the front desk. I know a lot of people that knew Aliseo loved him. And it's also one of those moments where, what do we do when we lose someone? Or how do we celebrate them? I just want to read something before this is over. that he wrote. I'm going to try to do my best. I had two things I wanted to read before I end this, and they're both of my friends, because what this talk was really about is my community and the life of an artist without all the things that society says. Like, I may never have a show at the Met. I don't know, but does it matter? I think my life has been very enriched by the people I've met, by the people I know, and by the people I was blessed to know that have left as well. This is called As Much as the Ocean, As Much as the Sun by Eliseo Martinez. So in LA once, I was being driven to the airport, windows down, the sun coming in and mixing with the music on the radio. And I closed my eyes to listen to the city and how it sounded differently. One way when I inhaled, another when I exhaled. And I opened my eyes to catch the flight of some birds, wondering if these are the last things I will ever see, and feeling fine with that. And we pass a bus stop, and on the bench is a pregnant woman. She's wearing a brown dress with flowers on it, and she has on a comfortable shoes. And as I am thinking of the waves, the internally crashing waves on the end of America, she leans forward like a tired flower and vomits. Between her feet and the sound of her sick meeting the sidewalk has stayed with me as much as the ocean, as much as the sun. As much as everything else on that drive. And I think I'm going to end with that. But I think that I can't say enough that I'm happy to be alive right now and just happy to have my friends and my community.